Hello fellow enthusiasts and welcome to yet another figure review. As promised, this time I will take a closer look on this Pop-Up Parade L figure of Lain, released by Good Smile Company in the early month of this year. This is the box the figure comes in. It has some nice proportions and a fitting color scheme with all those grey and purple elements. On its backside we can see a bit of legal text and a couple of QR codes that lead you to various websites, and also 3 smaller pictures of the figure where only one of them is showing you Lain from behind. And this middle one tells us it's for illustrative purposes only. I assume because of the added background. Kinda like a serving suggestion, but only this middle one. Strangely enough, not those 2 other ones that basically show the same background. On the front side in the right corner we have also a small Universal Comcast logo, so apparently this is the company that currently holds the rights to this IP. And on the other side we can see her full name, Lain Iwakura, which is great because despite having watched the show back in the days when I was a young lad that spent all his allowance on anime DVDs with only 4 episodes on each of them that I had to get from the comic store. I had to walk there in winter, in the snow, uphill, both directions. If you have put a gun to my head and asked me last week what her second name was, I would have either answered with cereal or experiment. Unboxing Lain is pretty straightforward. Just open the blister and take her out and then unwrap the base. Again, this black disc that looks like a hockey puck, and place her on it where 3 pack holes ensure a solid stand. Okay, so now we also have a modern interpretation of Lain as a proper figure, with a size of roughly 8.7 inches and a canon height of 5 feet 1. This translates into a 1/7 scale. This is of course nice for fans of this all-time classic show, but the downside of having such a large version while having a relatively plain character design is that some of the surfaces tend to look flat and cheap. Especially the lapel section and her pockets on the jacket are far too flat and could have been sculpted with a bit more vigor. Same goes for the dark green skirt that admittedly has a nice printed pattern but otherwise looks a bit boring. I mean, this more modern version of her has an overall better look than those older figures from like 20 years ago. Yeesh. But then again, those were mostly garage kids, and also it would have been a shame if we don't improve over the span of 2 decades. And despite lacking areas, there are also a few well-crafted details on display, like this button placket that ends in a nicely shaded red ribbon, or the little stuffed animal with the torn head that dangles from her suitcase. The suitcase itself, unfortunately, is a mixed bag. Get it? Because it's literally a bag that has surprisingly detailed lashes and straps, but then again this whole beige color and this large flat surface in front makes this look a bit more like a toy accessory from a Barbie doll rather than a collectible. There was also an attempt of detail in form of this printed crest on her jacket. Technically this is well made, I suppose, but if we look at the actual footage from the show, it appears far too bright and well saturated. Especially the red portion has a much darker shade in my opinion. But then again, judging colors by the low resolution standards of late 90s animation cells isn't always easy. Perhaps we are just too used to perfectly lit 4K video produced by high-end cameras. Maybe this figure would look more appropriate if I lower my production value by a notch or 2. Since my old video equipment from the convention hopping days has long been sold, behold the amazing potato quality of the built-in camera of my Microsoft Surface 3. Honestly, yes, of course there is a difference, but it is way more tolerable than I would have imagined. Yes, with decent light and the right settings you can shoot good video regardless of the camera model. Okay, but enough of that. Let's switch to DLSS 5 on before we get accustomed to this look, because there are still a few things to discuss. First, her pose and outfit. When I think about Lain, her school uniform is only the third or fourth iconic outfit I would recall, but since most of her more memorable wardrobe is even plainer than this, I guess it makes sense why they choose this one instead. At least this is multi-layered and the pose also fits the melancholic side of her. I do like how the wind ever so slightly lifts this one edge of her jacket. Then there is her facial expression that is, as it's the default with this character, muted and distant. Although I do like the nicely sculpted hand that reaches for her hair, as well as the rubber band that forms this large strain on the other side. Could her pupils been a bit more fuzzy and larger? Sure, but I don't know if this would have looked better if everything else is presented in this more modern style and they would have just copied and pasted her anime eyes into it. If you are still a fan of this series or character, I'm sure it has come to your attention that Good Smile just a few months earlier also released this Nandroid version of her in the same outfit, and from what I can tell from the promotional pictures, only with one or two noteworthy accessories and only minimal variations of the faceplates. Normally I would always advocate for the larger scale figure, but given the fact that now a second version of Lain dressed in her bear kigurumi is on the horizon, I honestly prefer those two in the Nando ecosystem over this pop-up parade figure that basically does the same thing. Would have been nice if this version of Lain got a unique outfit, kinda like they did with Jill from Valhalla, that is also a niche character with a dedicated fanbase that got a pop-up L and a Nando released roughly at the same time. Not sure how long Good Smile will retain the rights to pump out Lain figures and also why they are doing this now, since to my understanding we are not celebrating any kind of anniversary within this franchise, but I guess devotees of her are delighted that an all-time classic still receives a bit of love. Also, since there isn't a ton of Lain merchandise out there, you would be stupid not to buy. But maybe this is exactly what those companies are banking on. Okay, this honest review might have come across a bit more negative than usual. Might be due to the fact that I did not buy this for myself, but rather for a friend who is a mega fan of the series. Usually my takes are a bit more positive, because when I do buy or pre-order figures, I only do those that interest me and that are presumably of good quality to begin with. But I guess we can put this theory to the test, because next time I will review a figure from a series that I really fell in love with, from Girls Band Cry, the Kremlin herself, Nina. Until then, take good care out there and keep having fun collecting.